How was that little meditation? It was good for you? Really good? Good. And the walking meditation?
To make the sitting better.
The two together help, yes. How many of you found that doing walking first was really helpful? Yeah, I think it is. They combine quite well. So. Right. Okay, well, are there any questions or anything that have come out of the experience of this meditation? Yes?
Should one do walking meditation even if one does not enjoy it?
Should one do walking meditation if one does not enjoy it at all? Well, I'm not so sure I really want anybody to do something that they don't enjoy at all. Is this because you found that you didn't enjoy it at all? And none of the different forms of it that I suggested were enjoyable for you?
The first form, if I speed it up, then I can enjoy it.
Then do that. Yeah. You might find later on that you come to enjoy some of the other forms, but it's fine if you don't. Yes?
Just not on the little pamphlet book on walking meditation, and it might be what she wants to do because it's kind of like driving in your car and meditating. It's a very fast-paced, and in other words, you don't embarrass yourself walking out in your neighborhood, and you count your steps as you breathe in. Take 4 or 5 steps breathing in, 4 or 5 steps breathing out. Just not one that little pamphlet like that. I've never. It's a lot faster. It's almost like a normal walking.
You can do the walking meditations that I described, particularly the one of just being in the present at normal walking speed too. But as he said, Thich Nhat Hanh's method combines the breath and the walking together, so you're timing your breath with your walking. So it might be something. Check it out. But by all means, there's no problem with doing walking at a more rapid pace if you find the slowness a problem. Do you have a question?
You spoke about when in being on the object, like 2 parts, like first placing your mind on the object, and then continuing the mind on the object. So it's easier for me to place my mind on the object than it is to continue.
Yeah.
So can you give some tips for that?
Sure, yes. So staying on the object, tips for staying on the object. Well, what I describe as being engaged with the object, and that's where creating some sort of a challenge for your mind associated with the object comes in. But not only for that reason, I would suggest that you want to be as aware as you can of the details of the sensations of the breath as they unfold. It's partly an engagement thing, and it's partly just increasing your mindful awareness. But so trying to identify exactly when the in-breath begins and ends and when the out-breath begins and ends is one way of making it more challenging for yourself. And then expanding your observation to include the pause between the in and out breath and the out and in breath, how long that is, and being aware in that pause. And then beyond that is being aware of the different sensations that occur during the course of one in-breath. As the air moves into your body, it doesn't produce just one single homogeneous sensation. It's a series of changing sensations. which you can become aware of. So, trying to become more aware of those is a way of engaging. It gives you more of a challenge or something to do. Noticing whether the in-breath or the out-breath is longer, which of those pauses is longer, noticing whether one breath is longer or shorter than the next. You know, when you breathe in a long breath, you know you breathe in a long breath. You breathe in a short breath, you know you breathe in a short breath. This is in reference to having not only this very focused awareness on the breath as you follow each sensations as you follow them throughout each breath, but also having an awareness of how the breath changes. You can only go so far, though, with those kinds of challenges. I don't know how far you've gone with them to this point. Have you tried those kinds of things?
Well, I find them to be distracting from the sensation of the breath, and sometimes I have a good success with the gap, the pause between breaths. Finding that, and also it helps me to really focus on the end of the exhale. Like that really helps.
Okay, and when you're doing that, don't forget any of the stuff in between. It's just if there's some details that aren't clear, then you're trying to make them clearer while remaining continuously aware of everything else. Do you find that helps somewhat?
It's that whole keeping track of this was longer than that is then I'm not on the sensation.
Well, you mean because there's a little bit of reflection that's
Then I
taking
have to think
place?
about it, yeah.
And you have to think about it.
Was this longer than
But-
that? You have to remember.
But that's quite all right if it helps you to not be distracted and forget and lose your awareness of the breath altogether.
But isn't that a different object?
Well, not really. It's you're still, you may be thinking about what you're observing rather than just purely observing it a little bit. But I don't think there's a lot of thinking involved in that. It's more just the remembering, or the having the intention in mind to notice the duration of each breath. So if you want to call that thinking, but it's not really a different object. It's still all about the breath. It's much more the same object than, say, you're thinking about what you're planning to do tonight after you leave or something, right?
Yeah.
It's like I say, you can talk to yourself about the breath too as you're observing it, and of course, that's not quite the same thing as only observing the sensations, but still, it's training your mind to stay continuously aware of the breath, and that's what you really want to do. So it's all right to don't be overly strict. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. If you're concerned that because there's some thinking involved in trying to notice whether this breath is longer or shorter than the last, I think you're being overly strict in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. Now, what will happen as your mind becomes more comes to more naturally stay continuously aware of the breath, then you won't need to think about those things so much anymore. But probably what you'll find is you're spontaneously aware of whether this breath is a little longer or shorter. It's just that your overall mindfulness will have increased to the point that is a part of it. Now, there is something else in this that you can do too, though. The mental process of sustained attention, and we think about that for a moment. I have suggested to you that there is some part of your mind whose job it is to decide how long the attention should be sustained on any one particular thing before it moves on to something else. And you want to influence that. So you want this invisible process that keeps your attention focused. You want to influence that so that it stays with the breath longer. Now, this is a reflection of the importance that you attach in your mind. The how to put it, it's almost like the enthusiasm you have for being able to succeed at this. You know what I'm saying?
Sort of.
Okay.
Maybe you could elaborate on what you want me to do with that enthusiasm.
What I want you to do, well, I want you to have that enthusiasm. You see, if your mind is invested with a sense of that, with a sense of continuing to be aware of the breath is important, and an enthusiasm for experiencing that, knowing that, then that will condition that part of your mind that is really controlling this, because you're not consciously controlling it. You're just trying to do things to keep from losing it. You're not driving the cart. You're just trying to hang on. But there's something else that's driving the cart, and you want that part to not to not change gears on you here. So the interest, the enthusiasm, the perceived importance of being able to do this, the satisfaction, the more satisfaction that you can feel, then the more easily you're going to stay with the breath. But in the midst of all of this, don't become attached to being successful in a way that it creates an impediment. You know what I mean? Now, if you do this, if you're doing this practice regularly, and over a period of time you really see no difference, that you say that, well, I managed to stay aware of the breath for 3 or 4 breaths, but that's it. It never goes any longer than that. Or then there's a problem. I mean, I don't. There's nothing about 3 or 4 that's special. But what I mean is, if you find over time that you're not actually making some progress that you can recognize, then we might need to look at it a little more closely and see if we can find something else that helps you helps to make it work better for you. Yes.
I experienced this time, I stood all the time on my breath, and the thoughts became less and less important. And I felt a spaciousness and also very grounded through the walking meditation. And all of a sudden, this thought comes in: maybe I'm just experiencing dullness. So there was also I was just sinking into that space, and so now I don't know the difference anymore between what is a calm awareness and what is dullness.
Yes. Oh, that's a very good question. What's the difference between calm awareness and dullness? Because, well, if we look at the progress here that we're after, in the 4th stage you don't ever lose the awareness of the meditation object, but you can have dullness, subtle dullness or strong dullness. And likewise you can have what we call gross distraction, where some distraction you don't lose awareness of the object, but some distraction becomes the predominant focus. Right? So you can still continue to have awareness of the meditation object at the same time that you have dullness. And the fact is that the dullness can make it easier to stay with the meditation object. So, as you're saying, how do you tell the difference? Okay, I'm staying with the meditation object really, really well. And then the thought comes that maybe that's just because the dullness is helping me to do that. And maybe it is. It depends on where you are in your practice, because if you're in that 4th stage, where you still have a tendency to have other thoughts displace the meditation object, then a little bit of dullness that helps you to stay focused is not a bad thing. Really strong dullness where you become in danger of becoming drowsy, but even if you don't become drowsy, the meditation object becomes distorted and really unrecognizable, then you want to correct for that. Okay? So this is why you need to be able to know where you are in order to judge what's appropriate to do or to not do. If you rarely have a subtle distraction become a gross distraction, then you also want to be alert for subtle dullness. That means that you're now entering into practice according to the fifth stage. Okay? And so now, rather than tolerating the subtle dullness that's been helpful, you want to recognize it and you want to correct for it. But if, on the other hand, being able to stay with the meditation object continuously is still rather new for you, and if you are still at risk of having some other thought or topic of awareness displace the meditation object, then it's all right to let there be a little dullness that helps you to develop this constancy and this consistency, and you can take care of it later on. But when you're aware that that's there, keep an eye that it doesn't slip into the gross dullness, the strong dullness. If it does, then you want to brighten up your awareness.
So observing it in my practice what's happening, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and what's really important here in this particular, in the fourth stage, which is, would you agree from what you read about that you feel that at least that period of practice you just described corresponds to
In
that?
my practice, I go back and forth. I
Yeah.
have complete phases where I'm just like that, what I just described,
Right.
and then all this other stuff. So it's like a spiral, back and forth kind of thing. But I would say more and more I stay on the breath, and I stay on that focus. Yeah.
So corresponding to the fourth stage.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what you're experiencing is normal. That's what you'll have. You'll move back and forth over several stages, different days and different sits.
Yeah.
And so you judge where you are right now. And so if this sit that you're doing today, you'd say, well, this is a fourth stage sit because I am still vulnerable to gross distractions, then you're willing to tolerate the subtle dullness. If, on the other hand, your mind's been really stable and you've been pretty invulnerable to gross distractions and you realize there's subtle dullness there, then go ahead and pull yourself out of that subtle dullness. Fourth stage is a balance. You let a little bit of subtle dullness be there to help stabilize you, but not too much. If there's too much, you bring yourself back. And there is, of course, all of the subtle distractions, too. And really, if they weren't there, you would probably be much more prone to dullness. As a matter of fact, if you find that things are getting really, really quiet in your mind, then check to see what's happening with your mental clarity and with the vividness of perception, because you might be sinking into a deep dullness. So that's how you want to practice in that fourth stage. Really good question, really good way of illustrating how this progression goes. When you feel really strong, though, that gross distractions aren't a problem, and of course you're quite aware of strong dullness, then you really want to be on guard against subtle dullness. You want to be on guard against any noticeable decrease in the vividness and clarity of your perception of the meditation object. And even more subtly than that, of any lack of your own subjective experience of mental clarity. You start to experience a little bit of mental fuzziness in the process, and then you want to bring the energy level up a bit. Thank you for that question. What else? Yes, Judy.
This is good. Well, I was trying what you said, to just plop down and, to relax, get into it. And I'm just not a very relaxed person, so when I become relaxed, then once I slowed down, I was thinking, this takes a lot of effort. And then I realized, no, maybe I'm putting too much effort. So then I was trying to see experiment how to walk lightly, and all that. And then I wonder if I might, there's stress on my joints and I'm going, because that really, like her, I was not enjoying it at all. But then I got information from doing that why I wasn't enjoying, because I walk a lot, as you know, during the day, that I walk fast, and it's, well, not fast, but it's faster, and it's like automatic pilot. The mind and the body are not engaged, I think, together, and I'm not really present. But when I am present, and I realize, good Lord, I must be putting all my weight on, like, my ankle or something, and I'm going, this cannot be good, and so it was very informative, and so it can't be like, very diligent. So then I come in here and I says, well, let's just try to relax and then. But so, does that just come, I guess, consistent, regular practice, and you, with the
Yes, it will come. And, everybody's a little bit different. So for you tend to be real speedy, and then when you do slow down, you slow down too much. So that's, but it makes it really clear for you, what you need to work on, and that's finding a balance. Really, that's what it is. It's finding a balance. It's letting yourself calm down, but not calm down too much. And you want to have relaxed alertness. I mean, mentally, physically relaxed, of course, but mentally, you want your mind to be relaxed, but still very alert. And that little phrase really does express the kind of balance that you're looking for. Not to become too relaxed, and not to become hyper alert, but to find that balance. And then the interesting thing that happens over time as you practice in the fifth and sixth stages and beyond that, is the energy level of your mind and your alertness can continue to increase, but you no longer are vulnerable to distraction because of it. So you don't want to become too relaxed. You're going to find the balance. Then later on, you're going to find that you can stay relaxed, but with more and more mental activity, more and more mental energy, while not becoming agitated and distracted. So did you then, you practice overcoming dullness here during this trip?
I did.
Right.
And I was given positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
And that helped.
Yeah.
That helped kind of bring me back a little more alertness.
That's good. And so you would bring yourself back to a state of alertness that you could sustain for a few minutes at least?
Yeah. But then it would kind of veer off again.
Yeah, that's very good. That's excellent. So, and and some of the others, anybody else dealing with dullness when you're sitting here after the walk? Yeah. Okay. So that's what you want, is to get up and to be on a plateau of alertness for a period of time before the dullness reasserts itself. What you don't want is the phenomenon of sinking, where you come up to the surface and then you're almost immediately sinking, and you even feel like you're being pulled down. So you want to, your objective is to really get yourself completely out of it so that it lasts a while. And did you have luck with doing that?
Sorry?
Did you have luck with doing that? Yeah. And what about the experience of having to do it a few times or several times, and then all of a sudden you're wide awake and it's no problem anymore? Anybody had that experience? Kind of? Yeah. Okay. That is the way the training and overcoming dullness will, that's how it will manifest itself. You'll have to bring yourself out. Sometimes it'll be through the entire sit, but more and more often you'll have the experience that a few times and then you're out of it. Stay out of it. balance thing, you've probably come across this in things that you've read, Judy, or some of you have. They always, in meditation and all kinds of different contexts, like to bring up the lute player. Don't tune the lute too tight and don't tune the lute too loose. That's the kind of idea there. That if you energize the mind too much, then you're agitated and distracted. But you relax the mind too much, and then it wants to go to sleep. Anything else? Yes.
I don't think you mentioned this today, but one of the techniques you've recommended that I use more now for getting out of dullness is bringing more awareness on the breath, just keying up how much detail you're focusing on. And I found that really useful, but part of my question was, in stage 4, you really just trying to bring it up to a state where you're not going into strong dullness, right? You're not so worried about staying up at a really kind of non-dull state, like that kind of really sparked up state. You're more just worried about not going into subtle dullness, right? And then working with gross distraction.
Yes. Well, what you say is true, but I'll put a little qualification on it, and I'll just repeat this for the recording. That in stage 4, where you talk about how you found it very useful to practice, where you become very intensely aware of the details of the breath, and it's very helpful. It energizes the mind. But in stage 4, what I was saying is you don't necessarily have to do that. But at the same time, you want to be as fully aware as you can. But if your struggle is that there's a lot of thought, a lot of other mental activity, a lot of thoughts, and you find that you're frequently experiencing a gross distraction as a result of that, then you allow more dullness. And then if the mind is nice and stable and you're aware that perhaps there's a little bit of dullness there, then go ahead and brighten up your awareness and see if you can still sustain that as well.
So I've noticed kind of both possibilities. Sometimes when there's subtle dullness, like a comfortable amount, that it is easier for sustaining the focus on the breath.
Yes.
But I noticed a lot of times it's a lot harder to be mindful of gross distraction or subtle distraction as it's turning into gross distraction. So
Yeah.
I've kind of had both experiences. Like this last it was much more the case that I was in subtle dullness and I couldn't get a grip on I was still able to stay with the breath on autopilot, but
Yeah.
it was in the most meager kind of minimal, tenable, tenuous way. And then the gross distraction I couldn't get the distance from it.
Yeah, so what you say is very true about if you start cruising in that comfortable place of subtle dullness, you become very vulnerable to an interesting thought or an important thought comes along, it'll grab your attention. So you can't, your introspective awareness suffers. Dullness affects all awareness, not just the perception of the meditation object. It's also directly affecting your introspective awareness that warns you when your attention's about to be grabbed by something else. So that is you want. Let's put it this way: you always want to be as fully and strongly aware as you can, only sacrificing that to the degree that's necessary to cope with a lot of distraction. Okay, and then when you start to enjoy some stability, challenge yourself. Your meditation will stay more interesting if you're always. It's like if you're always playing with your mind. If you're always experimenting and playing and trying and adjusting a little bit here and there and seeing what happens. If you think, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to have a really stable, relaxing, restful meditation, you will. You'll have a stable, relaxing, restful meditation. And you'll quite likely dive into dullness there. And also, it won't be as interesting, exciting, and if you're somebody that is vulnerable to thinking, you have to be very careful because when you do something like I said, experiment with it, you can easily start having discursive thoughts about it. The way I'd like you to experiment is more like, driving a very fast car, or skiing down a steep slope or something like that. There's not a lot of room for thinking. If you start thinking, you'll end up in trouble really quickly. In other words, the experimenting with, brightening your awareness or whatever it might involve. It should be more in the way you'd be doing something, because your mind, things change in your mind just like that. And so if you start thinking, what will happen is you'll get caught by the thought, and take you a while to let go of it. So the only kind of thinking that you really need to do is that sort of not very verbal sort of ideas arise and intentions arise, and you pursue them or you ignore them, but you don't get engaged in a verbal process about them. Some people are much more vulnerable to thinking than others. And you'll know if you're like that. It'll be obvious. I really like to think. Yeah. So if I start thinking about my meditation while I'm doing it, then it's it's just so easy. The next thing I know is one thought's building on another thought. And you can think and observe your breath at the same time. But what happens is your awareness of the breath kind of slips into the background. And you're really doing more thinking than you are observing the breath. So, and if the thought leads to an interesting thought, it can end up, you start out, you're thinking about what you're doing in your meditation. But before you know it, the thought is way diverged from anything at all to do with the meditation. You're analyzing and you're comparing. And you're, yes.
Could you comment on how to work with balancing when you're experiencing some positives? Your meditation just feels right, or you're feeling a little joy.
Yes.
And the reason I'm asking is I know sometimes when I think I balance this right, it takes me into deeper awareness. But other times it becomes a part of dullness.
Other times it becomes
a part of dullness.
Becomes a part of dullness. So let me just clarify. You're asking about the balance with dullness, and that sometimes joy and pleasure arise in association with it? Yeah. This is, dullness is inherently pleasant. I think that's why people like to make themselves dull in various ways. Going to sleep is pleasant. Dulling your mind with alcohol and drugs is pleasant. So there's pleasure associated with dullness. So that's the thing that you have to be careful of, is that you get into a comfortable place due to dullness. You're trying to find the balance. If you start becoming too comfortable, you should probably brighten up a little bit. And if it starts to become too pleasurable, then that's a good sign that there's too much dullness there. There's more dullness than there should be there. The meditative joy that comes later on is really a bright, alert kind of joy. It's not, as a matter of fact, when it first comes, its main problem is it has too much energy and excitement with it. And that more really comfortable, warm, fuzzy kind of pleasure and happiness is really more associated with dullness. And so do be on guard against that. Okay? But at the same time, if you're finding it useful to take that step back, just to clarify, when I'm talking about subtle dullness, we haven't talked about this enough that I'm confident that everybody knows what I'm talking about here. Now, when there's no dullness present, your mind is just really covering every tiny bit of the sensations of the breath. You know, you're getting right into it. You're staying right on top of it, and there's no gaps. There's this sort of anticipation of each new phase of the breath as it unfolds. You know, the inhale and the pause, and the exhale and the pause. And you're just totally on top of it, and it's really clear. And you notice right away if something changes. You know, if it's longer or shorter, if something changes, you're really aware of it because you're totally into it. And there's no dullness at all in that. The subtle dullness that we're talking about that's when you mentally sort of take a step back. There's a little more distance. You distance yourself from it. You're observing it in a gentler and easier kind of way. It doesn't feel as intense, and there's not as much effort involved in staying right on top of it. It's more just leaning back and letting it happen. And so when you're doing that, in order to stay focused, and you find that you leaning back, taking that mental posture, leaning back and observing the breath in a more relaxed way, helps your mind to be steadier. What you have to be careful of is that you go too far in it. And so there are some signs of that. If your attention is really steady and there's this soft, warm, fuzzy pleasure developing, then that's a sign that you can focus in a bit more. You can become more intense. Not that there's anything wrong with the pleasure of it, but it's a warning that it's going to go too far. It's going to take you too far, and you don't want it to do that. I was going to say something else, but it slipped away there. Oh, another thing that can tip you off is if your concentration seems to be really good, and you are not sure whether there's dullness in there or not, notice how you react if there's a disturbance or a sudden noise or something like that. If you have a startled reaction, then most likely, almost certainly, you are slipping into a state of dullness. When you are really aware, when you are really present, when there isn't any subtle dullness present, your reaction to a sound will be as though your mind catches it almost as soon as it happens, and there's not that kind of startled effect. It's just you're right there with it as it happens. So if you're not sure whether you still have dullness or not, watch for things like that suddenly jerking if somebody coughs or if a car horn honks or something. Yes?
Through the day, I have felt different levels of restlessness.
Yes.
And sometimes the restlessness was almost painful.
Restlessness was almost painful.
Almost painful. But then it would subside. So when it gets intense, what can I do about it other than shift or move?
Well, before you shift or move, first drop the sensations of the breath as an object and direct your attention fully on the restlessness itself. Investigate how it feels. Where do you feel it? What qualities does it have? How do they change? Just investigate it objectively and see what happens. And that might be enough right there. And as long as it's really, really strong, you can take it as a meditation object and it'll serve all the same purposes that the breath does.
I did do that.
You did do that.
Yeah, and it kept me very alert.
It kept you very alert. Okay. Yeah. Sometimes, though, the feeling of restlessness will just go away, and then you can go back to the breath again. And sometimes, like any other kind of discomfort, it may become so intense that you realize that, you're going to try to do something to relieve it. And when you realize that that's going to happen, don't just be overwhelmed by it. Don't let an urge arise that forces you to suddenly shift in position or move or do something to overcome it. But rather, come to that point of accepting that, yes, I'm going to need to move. Therefore, I'm going to move intentionally and make it fully intentional. Decide when you're going to move and exactly how you're going to move, and then be fully mindful of it as you move. And then, when you make your move and the discomfort or the restlessness disappears or fades, then go back to the breath. So that way you're always meditating. You're always directing and sustaining your attention. You're keeping the mind in the state of being trained towards the malleability and wieldiness that you ultimately want to have. We haven't sat for very long periods of time, but may have been long enough some of you experience pain in sitting. The discomfort is painful. And you treat that in exactly the same way. Almost all of these things is, first you disregard them as long as you can disregard them. Just let them be there. And then when they become so intense that you can't disregard them, because they're actually starting to take control of the attention, then you take them as the object. And they'll either lighten up and let you go back to your meditation object, or they'll become so intense that you feel the inescapable need to take some action to relieve the discomfort, and then do so. And then go back to the meditation object. But sometimes you just use that as a meditation object as long as you have to. You don't reach the point where you have to move, but it doesn't lighten up to the point that you can come back to the breath, so you just take that as a meditation object. So we've discussed, and mostly the first 3 or possibly even 4 stages of these 10 stages today. Didn't spend too much time talking about the details of establishing a practice, but I think I did emphasize, hopefully enough, how important that is, how absolutely essential that is. And maybe there's other details of these stages that I didn't make clear enough, but I feel as though the discussion is probably going to move beyond these things tomorrow. So in the time we have left, let's just make sure that everybody feels like they really have a good, solid understanding of what's involved in these first 4 or 5 stages. Yes?
In the last conversation, it was just hitting me, like I've not had much practice at a distraction or a pain, but when we were talking about using that as your meditation object and then investigating it, I just had a little more clarity, I think, about how I would investigate my own meditation original object.
How you would investigate your own...
The original meditation object.
How you'd investigate your own original meditation
Because
object.
I wasn't clear on what questions should I ask and how do I really investigate this. But the idea of it being a pain or a distortion or somehow normalcy, I don't know if there was enough to investigate about that. But if it's...
Okay, I think what you're asking, and correct me if I'm mistaken, is to just to speak more directly to what we mean when we say investigate the meditation object, and also what we mean when we say investigate something else like a pain or whatever else.
Right.
But starting with the meditation object, how do we investigate that? Okay, that's an excellent question and very worth us talking about a little bit. I said the meditation object is a sensation of the breath. And so we want to take the stance of being sort of the curious scientist, examining the sensations of the breath objectively. Some of the things that are involved in this is that we're not in a relationship of it being my breath. We're not even really in a relationship of it being breath. It's the sensations of the breath. And the fact that the sensations come from your breath is it's a true statement of the circumstances, but what we're interested in is not the breath that's producing the sensations, but the sensations that result. Okay? So we're not getting into, or we're trying not to be in the place of conceptualizing, well, here's my body, and my body is breathing, and here is the air that is being drawn into my body and the air that's going out of my body. That's all, in a sense, a kind of story that our mind makes up to explain these sensations. And what we're doing is we're going to ignore all of the story and just see what is really there. And when your eyes are closed and you direct your attention to the sensations at your nose, there's no breath there to be found. There's no air there to be found. There's no body there to be found. There are only these sensations. The sensations come and go. They change. Okay? And so this gives our whole investigation a very objective quality. What sensations are present? How are they changed? How do they change? How do they go away? What new ones replace them? How do they change? How do they go away? Just observing as it unfolds in front of us. And then the other things that I talked about of noticing exactly when the sensations of the in-breath begin and where they end. Well, it's usually very easy to see, to observe the beginning of the sensations. But where the in-breath ends, it's a little bit subtler. And then if we go to the beginning of the out-breath, it is clearer, but maybe not quite as clear as the beginning of the in-breath. So then you're looking to identify those in your investigation really clearly. You know, like you got to write a report on this or something. Well, not without getting into thinking, but you know, if you had to pinpoint, you know, for some reason or another, exactly what does constitute the end of the sensations that you've been observing that are produced by the air coming in. And then what are the qualities of these? As you first begin, you know, the air coming in is cool, but then as the cool air cools the tissues in your nose, you don't feel as much temperature difference. And the air is still as cool as it was before, but now because the nose, inside of the nose is cooler as well, the difference isn't as noticeable. And then there's the movement. Begins strong, might become weaker, might become stronger again. It goes through its own changes. So you're investigating, in the sense, you're investigating, observing. You're just trying to fully grasp what's taking place there. Not conceptually. The concepts are there. Your mind still keeps conceptualizing in breath and out breath. But eventually you'll come to a point where it doesn't. And you're not even sure whether the sensations that you're examining right now are in-breath sensations or out-breath sensations. And it doesn't matter, because they're just sensations. And you're totally focused on investigating them. Does this help to explain that part of it there?
It does.
Okay.
And remembering the metaphor of a fast car or skiing dust, I mean, that made me think, I'm
Yes, yeah. Yes, when you think of it in those terms, you start to realize how much more scope there is to really be focused and to be aware. What's happening in terms of our experience all the time is happening so incredibly quickly. And we ignore most of it because it makes our life really simple. But now in our meditation, we're trying to change that, and we're trying to really notice what's happening. And what is really satisfying, gratifying, is when you realize that you can do that too. You have this experience of your mind becoming capable of being just that much more alert and aware and on top of things as they unfold. Now we'll move this to examining a pain, for example. To take the pain as a meditation object, you want to also be in this very objective stance. None of this is my pain, my knee, oh, I don't like this. I mean, that's going to be there, but let that be there in the periphery. What you want to do is, you're once again this curious scientific observer that, oh, a pain. I wonder what a pain really is. Let me look at this pain. How big is it? And with your mind, just notice how big it is. And notice if it's moving, or if it's getting larger or smaller, if it's getting more intense or less intense. And what qualities it has. Is it sharp? Is it dull? Is it throbbing? Is it aching? Is it deep? Is it superficial? Or, just see what it really is there. So you're in this objective mode of observing and examining and investigating. With pain, you can take that to saying, well, okay, there's a variety of sensations here. And what is it about these sensations that causes me to call them pain? Or is there only one of these sensations that's pain and the other sensations are just dullness or achiness or something else that is not so negative? It's very important to do that. It's an important part of your practice to have enough pain that you get some experience with objectively observing pain and examining the nature of pain, understanding your mind's reaction to pain. So take advantage of it, because there's a lot to learn from it. When you get to beginning in usually the fourth stage and really becoming noticeable in the fifth and sixth stage is where that purification process that I talked about, you'll have strong emotions coming up and recollections of the past and things like that. So you need to have already wet your teeth on examining pain to be able to examine strong emotions also from an objective perspective, also without getting into my fear, my anger, my this, my that, but rather fear arising, anger arising. What does it feel like? How big is it? How small is it? How does it change? So you practice with pain, and then when it comes to these emotions, then you can much more readily be able to examine them. Take them as your meditation object as necessary. Be with them, live with them, accept them, not fight them. Instead, investigate them, and when the time is appropriate, let go of them. Same thing with memories and thoughts. The stickiest thing of all is our thoughts, and as soon as something really powerful comes up, the tendency is we get swept away in the storyline. So the more practice that you can accumulate with pain and emotions and things like this, of staying distanced and staying objective, then the better off you'll be when the really important things that you need to examine objectively so that you can let go come up. Okay? And I'll just point out too, with these unpleasant thoughts, feelings, and physical sensations, that they are a good opportunity to discover the relationship between pain and suffering, and how we turn pain into suffering, and how we take unpleasant emotions and thoughts, and how they become intolerable. Because taking pain, for example, if you examine and investigate pain the way I've described, you will discover that when you're objective with it, it's much more tolerable. And sometimes even ceases to be painful. It just becomes another sensation. But in the process of doing that, you're going to find it's not always that way. You'll notice the difference is when you resist the pain. When you resist the pain. And this is the same thing when you've got a pain and the idea comes of moving. If I just move my leg, this pain will go away. And notice that when you have that thought of, oh, if I do this, it will go away, that the pain immediately becomes more intense. It's like, oh yes, I've got to move it. Or if you think to yourself, well, I'm going to sit here as long as I can, and then your mind will say, oh, I don't know if I can stand this. And that's a resistance. When the mind resists something, it becomes greatly amplified. And it becomes more intolerable and less acceptable. The same thing will be true when you're dealing with unpleasant emotions. As long as you can stay objective with them, you can tolerate them much more easily. But when you start rejecting them, when you start, I sure hope this goes away soon. What am I going to do if this gets worse? Or what if this doesn't go away? These kind of thoughts. These are all resistance, and they're going to make it just really hard to deal with. Very, very hard to cope with. If fear comes up in meditation, then that's a really good example, because you can start being afraid of the fear, and it just gets worse and worse. You have a positive experience, and you examine fear when it arises, and you find that examining it mindfully and objectively, it goes away, and you go back to your meditation object. Then it comes back again, and this time it doesn't go away. And so now you start being afraid that, well, maybe it's not going to go away this time. Well, for sure it doesn't. The fear becomes more intense, and you're thinking, oh, this fear is going to ruin my whole meditation. What am I going to do? How can I stop it? Or maybe I can't meditate anymore because I can't put up with this. Be aware of that. You get to experiment a lot on the easy things, the discomfort, the tension in your shoulders, the things like that, to discover what's going on. Because this has implications for your whole life. Your life is filled with things that are painful and unpleasant. And what you discover in meditation applies in your life. That there's no way you can go through life without experiencing unpleasantness. But you don't have to suffer in reaction to it, through resistance to it, in the way that you have been. And our psyches may have been conditioned to a variety of unpleasant emotional reactions. But the same thing, we don't need to continue to amplify them in the way we do by resisting them and by reacting against them. That we can come to a place of acceptance which will allow these things to go away and become free of them. Other questions? Comments? So tell me the truth. Do you really feel like you have a comfortable grasp of the first 4 stages of meditation, even if you aren't already at the 5th stage? All right. And if you aren't already if you haven't already mastered any of these, I want you to know that you can, and you can very quickly, fairly quickly. If you're diligent, if you're consistent, you will be able to. You'll have that 15-minute meditation or that half-hour meditation where you don't really lose the meditation object, and it's wonderful when it happens. And you can know that it's going to happen again, and it's going to happen more often, and it's going to happen more easily. The same thing is true of all of these things. Also, these first 4 stages are going to be the ones that do take the longest and are the most difficult. It gets easier after that. The next one that you might get stuck in for a little while, but probably not too long, is the 7th stage. And we'll talk about that some tomorrow. But it does get easier as you go along, and it moves along more quickly. So if you are still in the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th stage, just keep that in mind, that all of the work that you do right now is going to pay off in the future. Okay, well, I hope this is useful and helpful to you. I know a lot of this, I know that for some of you, this is repetition of things that I've been telling you, bits and pieces on our Thursday night sessions. And some of you would have heard a lot of this about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago it was. I covered it before. But just keep trying to understand it, put it to good use, and like I say, hopefully someday you'll all end up helping other people, teaching other people. That's what I really hope. So we'll end our teacher training session for today. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow.